Which country is the biggest and the most dangerous enemy of the United States of America?
Let's say China. 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 You go over to China. 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 You take China. 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 I love them. China. 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 I have to have my China.
That's right, China. That's what I think at least. If China and US would go to war tomorrow, who would win?
The United States of America.
I'm placing my bets on the US for sure. Estonia and USA are allies, so I'm for the USA. But we don't know for sure, so let's watch a video. I have two videos prepared for you. USA versus China, who would win? The second one is USA versus China soldiers comparison. He's gonna be the US. My friends, I want to offer you light entertainment. For you who are interested in the US military and you might be tired from the politics happening inside the US right now, I want to offer you entertainment. Going back to the military scene, I hope you guys like this decision. I hope you are on board with me. I appreciate you being on my channel and subscribing. Thank you so much for watching my videos. And thank you to the patrons who didn't leave when I made the video on the Capitol attack. A lot of the patrons left, so I might be eating noodles now, I don't know. Thank you to the ones who stayed. I have 3 new names for you. We're Robert Jeminus. Jeminus. That's how we say J in Estonia. Joit. Jeminus. Thank you for staying a Patreon. Chris Thornton. I'm doing it on purpose so you hear how your names will sound in Estonian. Chris Thornton, thank you for becoming a Patreon. If you want to support the channel, the link is in the description below. Go and grab your Estonian YouTuber cup, my friends. If you don't have it, go and get it. And let's dive into the video. I better not drink it, it's hot as hell. I make my tea just before I start the video. I don't know why I do it, because it's too hot. I cannot drink it first after the video, but I always do it like that, so I apologize. I have to be slurping all the time, and many of you have brought that out. Why is the guy slurping so much? Because my tea is too hot to drink, sorry.
In the year 2020, the US is still the world's sole superpower, but China is not far behind. Both nations have huge
Bear through the animations with me. I'm not a huge fan of the infographics animations. They're kind of childish, but I like their videos, so bear through it with me.
amounts of influence across the globe and economies that generate enormous wealth. But what about their militaries? If China and the United States were to go to war, who would have the advantage? In this military comparison, we're pitting China's People's Liberation Army against the United States military to see how they match up. After we lay out the capabilities of each, we'll decide who will win in an all-out war. Bear in mind that both of these militaries are always changing, so it's important to keep an eye on the future. In the end, it'll all come down to which country has the stronger and smarter military. Let's see if you come to the same conclusion we do, of who would win in a war between China and the United States of America. In terms of resources, China and the US are both well equipped to support their militaries during the war. It's well known that the United States spends more money than any other country on its military.
I think the US spends more money on its military than the next 10 countries combined. Because the US has about 600 foreign bases, and no other country has even over 100 foreign bases, I think. The US is a world's power. If you take planet Earth, aliens come to Earth and they look at the military comparison on planet Earth and they would probably say, oh, this planet belongs to USA. Because it kind of does. If I was an alien and I would see how big and powerful one country is compared to others, I'd assume that. But maybe I'm a stupid alien, I don't know. Let's see the video.
The most recent military budget for the United States was around $721 billion. That's more than many countries' entire GDP. On the other hand, China's military budget is around
The US military could buy the entire country of Estonia, but we are not for sale.
$178 billion. Notice the huge contrast between the two nations' military spending.
We
Just in
cannot even
pure
compare.
spending, the United States beats China. But just because a country spends a lot of money does not mean they have the better military equipment or personnel. Although
it
the United
does.
States invests more money in their military, China leads with a different resource: manpower. If all-out war happened, the ability to...
Yeah, but what point is manpower? Look at the Gulf War. I've made that example many times. What good is manpower if they're getting picked off by the drones and AC-130s? No good. No good. You can even have 100 million more soldiers. they will still die to explosions the same way as 10 soldiers. It doesn't really matter. The drones are up there, my boy.
To manufacture weapons and replenish casualties would be vital. The current population of the United States is just over 330 million people. The population of China, around 1.5 billion people. Of course, not everyone in each population would be able to fight or work in factories, but just in terms of people, China vastly outnumbers the U.S. This brings us to the active number of military personnel in each country. Who has the bigger military? Well, it should come as no surprise that the number of soldiers in China's military is much larger than the United States. With more people in the country, there are more people in the military. In fact, the number of military personnel in China is almost double the amount of military personnel in the United States. The U.S. military consists of around...
But I don't think it's about the numbers, really, in the military nowadays. I mean, Second World War, very greatly about the numbers. Soviet Union just overwhelmed the Nazis, who had better equipment, better weapons, better infrastructure, better command system, but the USSR had more men to send to their deaths. It mattered a lot back then, but nowadays, it doesn't matter how many men you send to die, US will have weapons to kill them. Sometimes these weapons don't even need a person to control them. Unmanned. So you don't even need people to kill people. It sounds so bad, I'm sorry. Welcome back, my friends. Estonian soldier hat competition. In this competition, the hats you get will put points behind your home state. I'll mention your hometown and you'll bring some pride and fame to your hometown and home state. Maybe your friends will see your name, who knows? Maybe your grandma will see your name. We have 5 new points. Matthew Meyer, Tom's River, New Jersey. Who is this Tom and why does he have a river and why don't I? The 5th one for New Jersey, baby. Jeff Potts. Sorry, your name is funny, sorry. Sherman, Texas, baby. Texas maintains the lead with 20 points. Arizona, come on, keep fighting. I was so happy when I saw Arizona in the first place. Now it's Texas in 20. Arizona, somebody just get 4 hats and put Arizona number 1 again. We have Vanessa Downen, a woman. Ooh. St. Charles, Missouri. First point. Mrs. Vanessa did history for her state. Her state, I usually say his state. It's cool. More women should be getting the hat. What's wrong with the hat? Why only guys? Hey ladies, get it! We have Michael Phillips from Charleston, West Virginia. Another new state. We don't have West Virginia. We have Virginia, not West Virginia. I don't have any more room. I'm gonna make it, and in the next video or something, I'm gonna redo so we have everything organized. But right now I'm just gonna add it. Damn, you guys really want to represent your states. First point for West Virginia, baby. Mountain Mama, Shenandoah River. And finally, Michelle WAXMAN. That is WAXMAN, man of wax. Mocksville, North Carolina. 5th point for North Carolina also. My friends, you're doing marvelously. You can pat yourself on the back. You're doing something good. In January, YouTube revenue is really fluctuating up and down. It's usually lower. I don't know why. It's New Year, everybody's working, nobody wants to advertise. And actually, if you get these hats or become a patron, it bails me out a little bit. So thank you so much for the people who are actually doing it. I hope your day is going good. I send good energies to your way. Woo 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 woo. Do you feel it? Woo woo woo. Good energies just touched you. Back to the video.
Around 1.3 million personnel on active duty. The People's Liberation Army has just over 2 million military personnel. If war broke out between the two countries, the United States would need to immediately reinstate the draft, just to come close to matching the number of military personnel the People's Liberation Army currently has. Due to the immense size of the Pacific Ocean, a war between China and the US would most likely not start on land. So let's first look at the Air Force capabilities of each nation and how they stack up against one another. The total number of
Do you mean the biggest Air Force in the world and the second biggest Air Force in the world? Because by my remembering, the second biggest Air Force in the world is US Navy and the biggest one is US Air Force. So if you combine them, you get the ginormous Air Force. That can take on anything. Okay, stop getting excited about this. Everybody knows this already. Stop it. focus on the video.
Military aircraft the United States has is around 5,370. China's Air Force contains about 3,010 planes, but these numbers are always fluctuating as new planes are built and old aircraft are retired. Right now, the Chinese military is building and purchasing aircraft much faster than the U.S. It's estimated that in a few years the number of aircraft between the two nations will be comparable. But what about the types of aircraft? Which country has better fighter planes, bombers, and transports? The United States has a vast array of aircraft at their disposal, the most impressive of which are the F-35 Lightning, F-22 Raptor, and F-15 Eagle. These fighter jets help the U.S. maintain air superiority. However, China has its own stealth fighter in the J-20, although it's only available in extremely low numbers and is generally considered a poor man's version of the American F-35.
I mean, let's talk about the Russian Armata tank, the new Russian tank. It's the same as J-20. Russia has the new tank, yes. They have it on paper, they have made about 100 of them, and boom, it exists. Russian army has the most powerful tank in the world. Well, if you only have 100 next generation planes or tanks and you're going up against a country like US, who is about to order 2,000 F-35s, you're dead. If you cannot build a few thousand of those new planes or tanks, you pretty much don't have them, because it's not a game changer, so it doesn't matter that you have them, they will be picked off. And they will be targeted because US knows they are the new part of technology about your armies.
In the air, the American military still retains a lethal advantage over the Chinese military with more sophisticated avionics, a much larger fleet of fifth-generation aircraft, and a far greater number of support aircraft such as tankers and AWACS platforms. American pilots also train on average 20 to 30 hours more per year than their Chinese counterparts, and in more realistic scenarios than the Chinese. As we look at other aspects of the Air Force in each country, we find that larger aircraft such as bombers and transports are not equal. The United States has a clear advantage. There are two reasons for this. The first is because the US just has more aircraft. The second reason is because a lot of money being pumped into the United States military goes to research and development each year. The United States aircrafts are up to date, while the Chinese Air Force is still working with functional but older models.
And let's talk about the fact that the US can actually make money back. All the money that goes into research and development, of course, it is a lot of money, billions. You cannot make it all back. But the US exports its planes. F-35 is a product of export. F-22, nobody has it except for the US, because it was, until very recently, the best fighter plane in the world. It wasn't to be exported, because no one is supposed to have it. But F-35 was made to make money. It was made to sell. Norway wants it, Japan wants it, many countries want it, and they will get it. They will have to pay the price though, and with that money, US is balancing out the checks, balancing out the numbers. They make some money back actually. US military is a little bit a business also. That's a controversy, let's not get into that.
You don't need to look much further than the United States' Boeing B-52 Stratofortress, Northrop B-2 Spirit, and Rockwell B-1 Lancer to show that in terms of dominating ground targets from the air, the US has the advantage.
And you cannot shoot down the B-2, so what are you gonna do about it? You cannot shoot it down, it's just gonna bomb your infrastructure and you can just watch and cry.
And the skies, the next most important military technology in a war between China and the US, would be the Navy. Controlling the oceans in this conflict would be vital for success.
USS Zumwalt, the new ship that nobody really cares about. Yeah, it's about the aircraft carriers, let's be honest.
One of the most important ships in a naval arsenal would be the aircraft carrier.
Yeah, baby.
The floating fortresses would be crucial to launching airstrikes on the opposing country. Currently,
11
the
of
United
them.
States is the world leader in aircraft carriers. The US has 11 active aircraft
11,
carriers,
not
while
20.
China only has 2, and only one of those is currently rated as combat ready. This clearly puts dominance of the ocean in favor of the United States military. But what about other?
Domination of the oceans, no. If you have 11 aircraft carriers, China has only one battle ready. It's easy to take down that one battle ready aircraft carrier and then bring all of those aircraft carriers into South China Sea and just dominate the airs and airspace over China and then dominate the land space over China. You just dominate China. You have so much air power anywhere you want, because aircraft carriers are very mobile. And then you could put the submarines attacking targets on ground, overwhelm the anti-rocket systems. Okay, getting too far ahead of myself.
Warships. If China could destroy the U.S. aircraft carriers, would they have the advantage? The United States currently has around 430 naval ships on active and reserve duty. However, only about 300 of those ships are currently able to deploy at a moment's notice. If war broke out between...
Only 300. 300 is a huge number if we're talking about modernized battleships. It's not only, it's wow. 300 at a moment's notice. Boom, they're at your doorstep. Knock, knock, sir, excuse me. You have 300 enemy ships at your doorstep. And you're like, oh, I didn't order any pizza, I don't know.
Between China and the United States right now, China would have a fleet of 335 ships to call upon. But just like the case for the US, not every ship would be available for combat, with about 20% on each side being currently undergoing maintenance, retrofit, or rest and relaxation for its crews. Without eliminating the US's aircraft carrier fleet, China would stand no chance of victory in the Pacific if all-out conflict took place. Yet even
no chance of winning. If you don't take out the aircraft carriers, you have no chance of winning. Whichever country you are, if you're going against the US, it is all about the aircraft carriers. Midway showed us that. Coral Sea showed us that.
With American carriers out of action, China would be extremely hard-pressed to deal with the American submarine fleet. While it has its own fleet of 74 subs versus the US's 66, China severely lacks in anti-submarine warfare assets and would be ill-equipped to take on America's silent service.
Also, if you compare, as much as I know, a lot of US subs are nuclear and very silent and deadly. China's subs are mostly diesel and very loud, so they would be very quick work to be destroyed. They're useless actually. If they're loud, they're useless. They can be found and shot down, sunk, not shot down, sunk. They will be sunk.
The American side, a disastrous performance by its own anti-submarine warfare assets during exercises in the early 2000s revealed a terrible crumbling of the American Navy's capability to wage anti-submarine warfare after the end of the Cold War.
Oh no.
Since then, and with the help of ultra-silent diesel submarines from partner nations, the U.S. has undertaken great steps to once again bolster its ASW capabilities and is believed to be well prepared to face any enemy fleet as the world prepares for great power competitions once again. For now, the U.S. fleet remains supreme, but it's divided between responsibilities around the world, while China can focus the entirety of its efforts in fighting America's Pacific Fleet alone. With a rapidly modernizing fleet and more sophisticated shipbuilding efforts, China looks set to close the gap between itself and the U.S. in the approaching decades. What would happen if the war made its way to land, though? Obviously, it would depend on where the war was being fought. The nation battling on their home turf would ultimately have the advantage because of their ability to replenish land forces more easily. Let's take location out of the equation.
It would be fought on China's soil, let me tell you that.
And just compare the land-based military capabilities of each nation. We know that in terms of soldiers, China outnumbers the US. We also know that if soldier numbers need to be replenished, there are many more people to choose from in China than in the US. Basically, if the two countries went to war using only soldiers, the United States would eventually succumb to the large number of available manpower China has.
It's not a computer game, it's not who has more men will win. Nowadays it's different. It worked like that in the Second World War and First World War, and even then, smaller armies beat larger armies if they had better tactics and weaponry. But nowadays, definitely about the weaponry and tactics and technology. So you might have 10 million more men. If you don't have the technology, you cannot do anything with them.
That being said, this is not how wars are fought anymore. Instead, land battles can be won using machinery, such as tanks. The United States has a tank arsenal of around 8,010 vehicles.
72
the US's
tons.
main battle tank is the legendary M1 Abrams, of which not a single one has been lost to enemy action yet. If deployed,
Not a single one! I'm sorry, I get so... 8,000 tanks! This video is just me getting very excited about this information. 8,000 tanks of Abrams, which weighs about 50 to 70 tons, one of the heaviest tanks in the world, and none of them have been lost ever because they're so good.
The United States tank army would be a devastating force. It would plow through anything in its path. China has fewer tanks at around 6,560, and just under half of those are first-generation tanks dating back to the early Cold War era.
If it comes to tanks, it is definitely about generation and technology. Look at Gulf War again. Iraq had tanks, they had Soviet tanks, but they were nothing against Abrams, nothing. They didn't even have night vision. And Abrams tanks just took them out because they could shoot further, their armor was thicker, they were more accurate. They were faster, better in every way. So if China has those tanks, what's the use for them if you cannot take down one Abrams, even if you hit it 3 times? What's the use for them? No use whatsoever. They need to build some new tanks. They need to buy the Armata tank from Russia and just build 5,000 of them. Then it would be equal.
2,360 of the Chinese tanks are Type 59s. These tanks were produced in the 50s and 60s. They're antiquated and currently retired, but still kept in reserve. This means that the tank force of China is actually much smaller than the United States'. The US pours billions of dollars into upgrading their tanks with state-of-the-art equipment and keeping their forces modernized.
Anything built in the 50s has no place on the battlefield if you're fighting the US. Nothing. Anything built in the 80s and 90s has no place on the battlefield if you're fighting the US. The only thing from the 90s from the US, I think that works perfectly still, is the A-10 Warthog. This is even from the 70s, I think, or 80s. Well, that baby never goes out. That still kills.
Clearly, the United States would decimate China in a tank battle. In today's day and age, battles are rarely fought only on the ground. At some point, they may not even be fought on the planet. Recently, the United States has implemented a new branch of the military,
Space Force!
Space Force's mission is to organize, train, and equip Space Forces in order to protect U.S. and allied interests in space and to provide space capabilities to the Joint Force. It is clear that the United States is moving toward militarizing this new horizon. But is China? Recent reports have shown that China has been rapidly expanding its space program. They were the 3rd country to launch a human into space behind the former Soviet Union, now Russia, and the United States. China completed this feat back in 2003 and has since ramped up their space program. They are the first and only country to put a rover on the far side of the moon, where they've made several discoveries. China has also been launching more and more satellites and military spacecraft into space in recent years. It's estimated that China has more than 320 satellites. 105 of them are military in nature. The United States has around 123 military satellites, even though the US has been in space much longer than China. It would seem that the breakthroughs at the China National Space Administration have greatly sped up the military satellite capabilities of the country. The budget for NASA in the United States has been cut year after year, almost immediately after they put the first man on the moon. China's space program, on the other hand, seems to be getting an influx of money each year from the government. How long until the research and development of China's engineers and space scientists surpass the US? In space, the country with the best technology and most knowledge of the environment will be victorious in battle. If the United States continues to fall behind in space exploration, they will not stand a chance in the space war with China. This brings us to our last comparison between the two countries, a comparison that has no winner. Instead, everyone loses. We're talking about nuclear weapons. As of right now, China has an estimated total of 320 nuclear warheads. That might seem like a lot, but it is nothing compared to the amount of nuclear weapons the United States has stockpiled. The United States has about 6,370 nuclear warheads under its control.
I have to say here, yeah, US has way more nuclear warheads. China has 320, but yeah, if it comes to nuclear, there's no winners. Even if you unleash 100 nukes on US and US unleashes 6,000 on you both equally lose. You both equally lose. There's no winners there. Everything would be destroyed, and you cannot bring this into the equation because you cannot use it. If you do, there's no point in fighting because you know you won't be there when the fight ends. No one will be there. Hey, all the presidents who are watching right now, China's President Xi being something and US President, don't use the nukes. Let's just settle it right here. You've heard it right here, folks. No nukes allowed.
2,000 of those nukes are awaiting to be dismantled and disposed of. However, if nuclear war broke out between China and the US, neither country would get a chance to use all their nuclear weapons. The human race would be annihilated long before then. So it's probably in China's and the United States' and the entire world's best interest that nuclear war never comes. Although the United States has a slight military advantage over China, we can't underestimate how far China's military has come in a relatively short amount of time. Also, the vast amount of manpower could be enough to allow China to hold out for a long time, slowly depleting the United States' resources. However, the reason we believe that the United States would win a war with China is because of experience. The United States has a lot more military experience than China. This means that
Well, they bring out the winning factor as experience, but honestly, I think it's about technology and advancement. US technology is just better and just more advanced. I think that's the winning factor here. Although experience is a big thing, I think it comes down to that Abrams is better, more aircraft carriers, better submarines, better fighters. Technology is better. It's better in killing, better in surveillance.
The leaders of the military have seen combat and know what works and what doesn't. The U.S. has been at war almost perpetually in one form or another since World War II,
That is
most
true.
recently
That's
in the
weird.
Middle East. Since the beginning of Desert Storm in 1991, the United States has maintained a military presence in the Middle East. In fact, the United States has been fighting in Afghanistan for almost 18 years. This means military personnel and leaders have constantly been gaining skills and experience in the art of war. China, on the other hand, has not fought in a war in over 40 years. The last war they fought in was in 1979 when China invaded Vietnam. Vietnam had just come out of its own civil war and had gained much experience during that time. The small country was able to humiliate the Chinese military, forcing them out of their country after only 3 weeks. It seems that experience can outweigh sheer numbers during wartime.
It is true.
It is for this reason
Yeah.
that we believe the United States would win a war with China if it were fought today. However, and some of you might have already seen this coming, if China continues to expand and upgrade their military as they've been doing in recent years, it will not be long before their military strength surpasses the United States. If this happens, it's a very real possibility that China would win a war against the United States in the future. Their drive to update their machinery and technology can be seen in their space program and the expansion of their military. Within the next decade, we at the Infographic Show may need to make a new video to reevaluate this military comparison between China and the United
That is
States.
true. Everything communist is People's Liberation. The People's Republic of China. Well, Chinese and all the communist governments, if you put the word peoples in before or end or in the name of your country, it doesn't make it democratic. Still communist, still a dictatorship. We have one more video. USA versus China soldiers comparison. Who has better soldiers? Yes, we know China has more manpower. We know US has better technology. But if it comes down to man, who is better?
China and the United States of America. These two modern titans regularly go toe-to-toe on trade deals, cultural influence, and intellectual property. But today, we're talking about soldiers. We've previously compared the US and Chinese military and the average American and Chinese citizen. But this video is somewhere in between.
Average American and Chinese citizen, that would be interesting. I actually want to see that.
In a modern ground war between American and Chinese forces, which infantry soldier would come out on top? We're about to find out by looking into each army's combat history, tactics, capabilities, training, and equipment. If ever China and America go to war, the whole world is in trouble. We're talking about two of the largest and most well-equipped militaries on the planet, China being one of the oldest civilizations in
I kind of have to. The animations. I feel like I'm a little kid watching a kids show, and we're talking about war here, World War III maybe, and it's a giant globe being like, oh, I'm so worried that I'm at war. But there's something to learn from this video still, so bear with me.
world has an incredibly illustrious military history. The country can be credited with pretty much inventing rocketry, as well as giving us Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Comparatively, the United States is one of the youngest civilizations on Earth. However, it makes up for this by having been in constant conflict since the early 20th century and has consistently been one of the world's highest
I didn't think
military
about it. China invented rocketry and gunpowder, and The Art of War, though I've never read it, is supposed to be the most important book in warfare. Period. Points for them, but it doesn't help them when they're attacking the US.
Spenders. Let's discuss some of the two countries' recent conflicts and see what it tells us about each of the country's soldiers. First, the Chinese Army, officially known as the People's Liberation Army or PLA. Specifically, we're going to be discussing the PLA's Army Ground Force, China's 1.3 million personnel strong fighting force. In the last 70 years, China's ground forces have engaged in significantly fewer full-blown wars than the US military. A number of China's recent wars, such as the Tibetan Uprising in 1959 and the Battle of the Paracel Islands in 1974, have been against forces so comparatively small they can't really be used to illustrate what a China versus USA matchup might look like. Also, because the United States and China are two of the largest and most well-funded militaries in the world, their equipment and training has advanced considerably over the last several decades. Perhaps the best conflict to focus on is the one that most heavily involved both the US and China's ground forces, the Korean War, taking place from 1950 to 1953. This might give us
some of my viewers, very few of them, but some of them actually have been to the Korean War and they're Korean War veterans. So hi to all of you. Thank you for your service. I have an honor that you're watching me.
better insight into the tactics of the two armies here. Modern Chinese infantry tactics have always been based around the fact that China has assumed numerical superiority. In the 1950s, the world population was only 2,556,053 people, and China ended that decade with a population of 551,960,000 people compared to the US's population of 150,697,361.
Why are they being so specific? This confuses me. To go to the last single person, they could just say how many millions is there. That's
almost a fifth the size of China's. The size of the US and China's armies today still reflects this disparity. The US today has 1,281,900 active personnel compared to China's 2.3 million. This disparity gets even worse when you take a look at the reserve personnel, comparing the United States' 811,000 to China's 8 million. How did this
8 million reserves? Wow, 8 million. But then again, Soviet army had, through it, the whole time of Second World War, about 20 million people went through the Soviet army rotation-wise. Big communist countries, they have huge populations and huge armies, but you look at the losses the Soviets took against Nazi Germany. So that's your answer. You can feed 500,000 people to Stalingrad and still not to take the city back. I mean, finally they did, but the price they paid.
Numerical superiority play into their on-the-ground tactics in the Korean War? To answer this question is the legendary human wave attack. And no, this does not literally mean sending unlimited waves of infantry toward the enemy in so-called human seas.
Yeah, no.
That's a common misconception. In reality, the human wave is another name for the PLA's short attack technique, which involves repeatedly sending small, typically 5-man fire teams in covert missions toward weaknesses in enemy defenses. These forces will then launch a brutal surprise attack, sowing confusion and worsening the weakness that was already there. If enough of these short attacks are successfully executed, a more large-scale attack would likely destroy whatever's left. And given that the PLA had soldiers to spare, they could keep up these attacks almost indefinitely. This tactic proved extremely effective for Chinese infantrymen, who would use it again in the Sino-Vietnamese War 29 years later. Much like the tactics laid out originally in Sun Tzu's aforementioned classic, The Art of War, the PLA rarely uses its huge forces directly. They often opt instead for tactics of ambush and subterfuge. Ambush tactics handed them several key advantages during the battles of the Korean War. An interesting case is the Battle of Chosin Reservoir, where a mountainside ambush allowed 120,000 Chinese troops under the field command of General Song Shilun to completely encircle 30,000 UN troops. They kept these troops, comprised mostly of American soldiers, trapped for 17 days. However, this brings us to the US tactics employed during the
120 troops cannot surround 30,000 troops. It's not possible. What? I don't believe this. Do you know anything about this? I'm not taking this.
Korean War, because in spite of being overwhelmingly outnumbered by the Chinese forces here, the 30,000 troops were able to break out of the Chinese stranglehold. In fact, they even dealt heavy casualties to their ambushers in the process. Why? Because in spite of being an overall smaller force, as mentioned in our previous video comparing the United States' and Russia's soldiers, US troops have incredible tactical versatility. Ground troops of US infantrymen are able to work with a greater degree of independence from their superior officers. They can defer to field commanders with immediate...
Did I get it wrong? Was it vice versa, that there was 30,000 Chinese troops and 120 UN troops? That would make more sense, because then they could break out, because they're better.
Situational knowledge, rather than having a rigid top-down chain of command on the battlefield at all times. The Battle of Chosin Reservoir was a horrific ordeal for the US troops, with stories of people freezing to death and bodies being used as sandbags not being uncommon. But the US troops' tactical retreat was truly miraculous. How did 30,000 troops avoid total extermination from a surprise attack that outnumbered them by 90,000 men? Well, in spite of being farther from home and suffering from outdated World War II equipment and shaky supply lines, the United States' troops were able to improvise and adapt to their situation on the ground. This pattern has held true in many subsequent US conflicts, such as the Vietnam War.
So the US troops are better because their command structure is more flexible and more open to changes and more adaptive to situations. I know this because Estonian military system is still a little bit like the Soviet Union's military system. It was based on that the regular private is a dog basically, and it is stupid, it shouldn't speak. And if you have that, then you cannot innovate. If you treat your private like a dog who cannot think, then they are dogs who cannot think, and they will not adapt to the situation. If US troops can adapt, they're already many steps ahead from Chinese troops, which is a communist government, communist command structure, very much authoritative military structure, which means the soldiers cannot think for themselves, unfortunately.
In the conflicts in the Middle East. While looking at these historical tactics can be useful in gleaning an insight into how a modern ground war between the US and China might play out, tactically the Korean War happened 70 years ago. What equipment and training do these two forces bring to the table today, when the USA and China's military spending and modernization has never been higher? First, let's discuss the equipment of the modern People's Liberation Army soldier. In terms of small arms, the primary armaments of the PLA are the QBZ-95-1 and the QBZ-9.
Why are they using this man's speaking voice? I'm hearing the narrator and there's an extra voice here. Why is it? Sometimes infographic show frustrates me so much. Oh my god, I don't want to use them anymore. It's so bad.
95B1. Introduced in the aftermath of the Gulf War in the early 1990s, the QBZ rifles were a direct response to Chinese observation of American military activity in Iraq. The QBZs are powerful, compact bullpup rifles with a 30-round magazine capacity. These weapons are strong, reliable, and accurate. It has a fire rate of 650 rounds a minute. An average PLA member's offensive loadout would consist of the QBZ-95-1, a bayonet for close quarters combat, and 6 WY-91 hand grenades. It's also been speculated that the QBZ-95 might soon be replaced by a new rifle, referred to by some as the QBZ-19. This speculative new rifle, first fully spotted in 2019, would be likely an improvement on the range, accuracy, and fire rate of his predecessor, with an option for fully automatic fire. A full rollout of this weapon, however, is yet to be confirmed. The United States of America's primary armament is the M4A1 carbine, a rifle designed for close quarters combat and introduced around the same time as the Chinese QBZ-95. This rifle was largely intended to replace the M16. The M4A1 carbine is slightly longer and more cumbersome than its Chinese equivalent, but with a significantly greater rate of fire at 700 to 900 rounds a minute, with an effective range of approximately 600 meters for an area target.
600 meters effective range. That's about 1,800 feet. That's 2,000 feet basically. Would you say effective range for M4 is 2,000 feet? I wouldn't say that. If you can hit anything with an M4, an iron sight or a red dot from 600 meters, you're a damn god. I mean, these weapons are very good, don't get me wrong, but just 600 meters is a sniper distance, let's be honest. It's a sniper distance, or just some lucky shots from machine gun or whatever, but you cannot precision fire with an M4 from 600 meters.
It's pretty much on par with the QBZ-95. A critical shortcoming of the QBZ-95, however, is features native to bullpup rifles, namely that they can be far more difficult to shoot when in the prone position than a traditional rifle, such as the M4. Reloading a bullpup rifle is also not as intuitive as a traditional rifle, and seating a magazine placed near the buttstock can severely affect the shooter's meld with his weapon. This can lead to a QBZ-95 shooter taking longer to re-establish their sight picture over an M4 user. However, in a close quarters combat situation, you can't underestimate the importance of the humble sidearm. For the forces of the PLA, this sidearm is the QSC-92 pistol, a 9mm pistol capable of holding 15 rounds per magazine. The American equivalent is the Beretta M9 pistol, a 9mm handgun that's been in service since the 1980s. This is another 15-round capacity pistol, relatively even with its Chinese counterpart. However, due to the U.S. infantry's dissatisfaction with the M9's performance during the Afghan wars, they're in the process of phasing in a replacement. This replacement is the Sig Sauer P320, also a 9mm handgun capable of holding 17 rounds per magazine, 2 more than the PLA competition. That being said, a soldier's performance in war is defined as much by their ability to take shots as it is to fire them. In this particular department, the Chinese forces are truly lacking. Despite China being one of the world's largest exporters of commercial body armor, the grand majority of the PLA infantry are not fitted with any form of specialized combat body armor.
Are you kidding me? Really? US Kevlar helmets, for example, have survived headshots from sniper fire. They actually can't take a bullet from a certain distance. They can take shell particles, everything. And the Kevlar vests, they will take a bullet from a certain distance. They will take shell fractures, they will take smaller explosions. They will save lives so often. So if you don't have it, almost anything will kill you because you don't have any protection. I think China needs to change that immediately. Really, that's number one. On boots on the ground, body armor is so necessary.
Armor. This is actually a major source of debate and controversy within the People's Liberation Army. Some commanders, such as Qui Wei from the PLA's Joint Logistics Provisions, adopt the philosophy that soldiers wrapped up in too much protective armor will get soft and lose their fighting spirit.
What?
Others, such as Equipment Assistant Wei Honghui, have a more pragmatic approach, believing that giving soldiers body armor will hopefully increase the soldiers' sense of security on the battlefield.
What do you mean they will get soft? Has this guy been on a battlefield? You feel a bit better than without it, but you don't feel safe. You feel threatened enough to not get soft. Believe me, like this argument is just invalid.
Battlefield. The divide between the commanders and actual infantrymen is clear here, though sadly for those infantrymen, the commanders make the rules. The result, little to no body armor.
Commanders make the rules, right? That's what we're talking about. When I say flexible command system, that means if information comes from below, from the soldiers up to commanders, they will listen to it and try to change things as they can. That's the US system. In the communist system, nothing comes from the bottom up. Everything comes from the up to bottom. If Estonia was part of the Soviet Union, our directives came from Moscow. Moscow was so far away. If they said plant some kind of a plant on Estonian fields, we had to do it. It doesn't matter that our climate is not suitable for the plants that are suitable for Moscow, we had to do it. And the same in the military. And this is the very good example about the command structure. In communist governments, in communist systems, you don't argue, otherwise you will be shot or sent to the gulags. Sent to the concentration camps, whatever they have in China. And if you say, I need a body armor, and they say no, you don't argue. That's how it is. The soldiers don't get their body armor. And that's bye-bye in the battlefield.
For the PLA. The forces of the United States are the complete opposite in their approach to body armor. For US troops, body armor has saved countless lives during the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, where sudden gunfire and the shrapnel of improvised explosive devices were amongst the biggest causes of death. As a result, the US military came to the conclusion that more body armor equals safer soldiers, and thus better soldiers. United States soldiers are also fitted with high-tech equipment, from night vision goggles attached to their helmets to enhance low-light combat to advanced radios. However, while this means that the average US soldier is generally far better equipped than the average soldier of the PLA, it creates its own major issue. Modern United States soldiers are often forced to carry up to 200 pounds of armor and equipment. Some military theorists have estimated that soldiers often have to carry up to 20 pounds of batteries alone just to power the juice-guzzling equipment they need on the job. While this armor and equipment might give soldiers a tactical edge, the edge is offset by the fact that PLA soldiers can move faster, stealthier, and retain energy without such a cumbersome loadout. However, advances in United States...
Okay, yeah, it has a slight point, but honestly, if I was given an option to lose all of that and go without body armor, night goggles, night vision, and enough food and drink and enough ammunition to battle, but I would be faster. Screw that, I'll choose all of those: technology, advancement, and ammunition. It doesn't matter that you're faster. I mean, US soldiers, they just train more and they're still faster. It's not an argument. Body armor will save your life. It doesn't matter how fast your enemy is. If they cannot kill you with bullets, if they shoot you in your chest, then they will die. It's just a stupid argument.
States military technology are rising to combat the weight increase issue. The U.S. military has created the Squad Multipurpose Equipment Transport Program. This program is designed to test a series of small resupply vehicles that can act autonomously, following infantry soldiers to the front lines with equipment, supplies, and ammunition. When these systems are perfected, it'd be likely to give the U.S. forces a major advantage over their Chinese infantry counterparts. So far, we've discussed the soldiers of these two superpowers in terms of numbers, historical tactics, and equipment. The final crucial element in the comparison is the training that these two training militaries give to their soldiers. How do the U.S. Army and the People's Liberation Army measure up here? United States basic training is among some of the most respected in the world, even across other world.
We've watched videos about Marines training, Navy SEALs training, and I've never seen anything like it. It is inhumane, they say, yeah. But this is what creates the best soldiers in the world. And when I say best, I mean better than Chinese, because they don't have a training like that.
Militaries such as the British, French, and Canadian Armed Forces. Much of the U.S. training regimen focuses on building their soldiers as people in terms of strength and endurance before training them as soldiers. The U.S. military also added an additional 8 weeks of infantry training to their regimen last year, extending the overall training period to 22 weeks to extremely positive results. Colonel Dave Voorhees, in an address at Fort Benning, shared data indicating the new training had improved their soldiers' skills in marksmanship, physical aptitude, and combat life-saving skills from day one of combat deployment. Sadly for them, the soldiers of the People's Liberation Army cannot say the same. One of the most frequent criticisms of the PLA is that while its forces are huge, they're also woefully untrained compared to most major militaries. International defense research analyst Timothy R.
I'm telling you, it doesn't matter how many men you have. If they are not trained, if they don't have body armor, if they don't have night vision, or if they just lack the skills, they will die. To the conditions, to the weather, to the climate, to the injuries, malnourishment, whatever can kill you in battlefield, or to the enemy. Numbers don't matter here. US versus China, country-wise, US would win. Soldiers-wise, US would win. It has the better soldiers, better training, better military as a country, also better equipment. It is just a stronger country, let's leave it at that. And any communist government, any communist system can never be better than a capitalist system. Democracy and capitalism they don't even compare to communism. Communism is just hell. Hell, real hell. People who want to live in the communist countries instead of capitalist countries, they are delusional. You're getting it from the first source. We were communists 30 years ago. My friends, thank you for watching this very long video. If you are still alive and you bear through this video, I salute you, my friend. To all the patrons, thank you for supporting the channel. To all the people who have gotten the Estonian YouTuber Cup and the Estonian Soldier Hat, thank you for supporting the channel. And until my next video, stay cool, my friends, and bye bye.